Evening, everyone. And first of all, may I say thank you to my niece Carmel, who's allowed me to come into her sitting room to deliver this. A tree fell across our cables during the storm the other night. It's wiped out all of our emails and telephones and Wi-Fi. So here we are in somebody else's, in niece's sitting room. What I'm doing tonight is really a very optimistic story, and I hope at the end of the evening you feel a little bit better, at least about the wildlife in our little corner of Tyrone. So let's start by getting rid of the Surbit. That's nothing to do with wildlife or conservation. It was given in 1998 for services to education. So I think we can get rid of that bit. It does sometimes give me a smile, though. I'm often asked to go into primary schools to talk about writing stories. I've written some children's books as well. And in a school in Newry, one 7-year-old had his hand up. I said to him, yes. He said, my teacher said you've met the Queen. I said, yes. And my teacher says that she made you kneel on a stool. I said, yes. And she tapped your shoulder with a sword. I said, yes. And he said, that's what I want to ask you about. Do you get to keep the sword? So let's forget the Sir bit, and I will go quite quickly through some of the slides. So don't worry if I'm pretty rapid with them. A little bit of background information first. Rosemary and I came to Northern Ireland in 2001. So this is a sort of 20th anniversary talk. She was headhunted to run the college in Omagh, and we agreed that it should only be sort of a 3 or at most 4 year stop in Northern Ireland. She sends her apologies, by the way, tonight. She's got another appointment. But it was going to be 4 years, and I think that's what we'd agreed on. But we put our house up for sale in Sherwood Forest, a 200-year-old cottage, and it sold almost immediately. So then we were homeless. And we tried to look at houses, buying houses in Northern Ireland, couldn't find one that was suitable. And then, in a weird twist of fate, 5 acres came up in this part of Tyrone. It was land that was once owned by Rosemary's father. Very rough sort of pasture land. He was killed in a tractor accident when she was 18 months, and the land had been rented out and resold several times over. But it seemed quite a nice twist of fate if we could get the land back into was the family ownership. You'll notice on this picture that particularly the middle hedge there, the yew hedge, was badly scarred, and I couldn't believe how wet the land was when we got to winter time. As an Englishman living in Sherwood Forest, it was very dry country, and the land that we'd bought was really, well, you can see from that picture, impassable by 4-wheel drive cars, and certainly difficult to walk on even in Wellingtons. This is a little diagram of what we had: a dry hillside, a small field to the top, and then 2 very wet areas. That was the 5 acres. But it was while we were sitting one day thinking about where we're going to put the house that Rosemary said, I don't know what's happened in the 30 years I've been away at career and university, but in those 30 years, all the bird life in this patch is gone. She remembered skylarks, curlews, even grey partridge, many small birds, butterflies, dragonflies. And when we looked around, there was nothing. And she actually used the phrase, well, we want to live in the countryside, but what we've actually bought is a rural desert. And that prompted us to look at what had happened in the area since Rosemary had been away to university in Korea. And I think I was quite staggered when I started to research it, just how much change there'd been. This is 20 years ago, don't forget these stats. So we'd lost 98% of wildflower meadows. I knew that in the eastern coast of England, the modern agriculture had wiped out a lot of wildlife, but I thought Northern Ireland had been missed, really. And I was quite shocked to find those statistics, to see how much land had changed in the 30 odd years. I actually went along to a local and very respected farmer who'd been farming for many years in the area, and to ask him what had happened to it in the 30 years that Rosemary had been away. And his answers are summarized here, and they were absolutely spot on and interesting. He said it was the new agricultural policy that moved from mixed farming, where he was growing roots and barley and some grassland, to farming almost totally to grassland, to single species pastures. Because he argued at the time, and he told me he stood up at a big meeting in Belfast at DAERA to say all of this, and he was howled down, really. He said that if you've just got pasture land, you'll have to increase the application of chemicals. And if you increase the number of animals per acre, and he gave me the example of the little farm next to him had traditionally 60 cows, and it now has 230. If there's such a substantial increase in the numbers per acre, then you've got to do something with the slurry. And he also said that if you have speedy cutting of grasslands for silage, then you kill off everything that's in the fields. And he said all of this 30 years ago. And when you look at Lough Neagh this year, because he predicted that the nitrogen and the slurry would run into the lakes and green it, and I think he's justified to saying, I told you so. Okay. And this is quite staggering in a way. You know, when I ask people, well, when did you last see? And I've gone through a few of the things there. When did you last see a skylark around here, or a curlew, or a grey partridge? Nobody's seen a grey partridge since 1970. Lapwings, an odd barn owl here. I've never seen a yellowhammer on the patch, and we used to see, up until 5 years ago, kestrels on our bit. And I saw one 5 years ago, and I suddenly realized the other day I'd not seen one, and started to research it a bit. And I found somebody in the south of Ireland who's specializing in investigating kestrels. And she said that there's been a dramatic decline in kestrel numbers in the south of Ireland. So that's still going on. In her view, it was because there's no voles in the pasture lands anymore. But when did you see hedgehogs, cowslips, newts, whatever? And at a meeting recently, I said 2 years ago, and this last summer, if you're driving around the little lanes around where we live, it used to be that insects were all on the summer months splattered onto your windscreen. And last year and this year, there's virtually none on the windscreen. So there's a very recent change there about the number of insects in the air. One wag, though, at a gardening meeting said to me, if there's no insects on your windscreen, Bob, you're not driving fast enough. Okay.
Bob,
So,
sorry, it's Kelly here. Bob, the sound quality just dips in and out. Is there any way you could put the headset on, or that you have there? Or do you
yeah, I
want me
don't know
to, do
quite where
you want me to text Carmel and see if she can come and help you with that?
hang on a minute.
Just it kind of dips in and out, and a few people have said the same thing. Just
I wonder if I can get. Does it work if I lean really closely? Is that
does work.
better?
It does. It does. Sometimes it's fine. Yes, that does work. I don't want you to hurt. I don't want you to strain yourself though either.
Oh no, don't worry. I'll
Okay.
lean right. I'll lean right up to the. Let me just get more comfortable.
Okay.
I'll lean right up to the screen, and I'm
Perfect.
sure I
That's a
can do
bit better. I think it's yeah.
That's better. Yeah, Rosemary said when we were sitting there, realizing that there was very little wildlife around, she said, "I just wonder whether we can turn the clock back and try and create a wildlife area as it was 30 years ago." But the trouble with that idea was that we had little knowledge of biodiversity between us. We had no knowledge of garden design. And since we'd had to get the land and we had to build a house, we didn't have any spare cash. But we did have a dream. And I think from day one, we were very lucky in that somebody said to me, if you're going to go with this project, what you must remember to do is to take photographs from day one, and then you'll have a record of the development of it. And when you get fed up or when you get disillusioned with trying to do it, you can look back and see that you've made some sort of progress. Now, I know that you invite all sorts of experts to do these web talks, and I just wanted you to give you some idea of my credibility as a wildlife talker. I read in a book that we need crabapple trees sometimes good for wildlife. So I bought one, put it near the meadow, trimmed it according to the book very carefully. And I was really proud of how this crabapple tree was coming on. And Rosemary said to me, you're always meddling around with that crabapple tree. When will it have some fruit on? I said, well, according to the book, it should fruit this year. And it did, but with Victoria plums. So that's the sort of expert you've got in front of you. Okay. Now, I think we all know that in developing a wildlife area, you need a whole range of habitats. So wetland, woodland, meadows. We thought formal gardens were not good for wildlife. We've changed our opinion on that. A lot of the wildlife really inhabits the most formal part of our garden. You need food and shelter, and of course, no pesticides if you can avoid it. What we actually did is draw up a plan. And I think that was very important because when you start to wobble a bit and not know where you're going, you can drop back to the original plan and see what was said. And we put those headings in it. You know, we knew what the outcome should be, and that should be that we could attract wildlife in every sort. We also measured the microclimate in our 5 acres, and it was astonishingly different. The top of the ridge was very windy and very cold, and then down in the valley, the sheltered bit behind the trees, it was degrees warmer. We also measured where the sun hits in the morning and the evening, and it was quite revealing to see the wetter, drier, colder bits of the whole plot. We drew up a careful scale plan drawing of it, and we settled on having a rural style. We thought it very important that it should just merge into the surrounding countryside. You know, trying to design something that looks better in a town just will not fit in a country setting. It's very difficult for amateurs like us to get your head around what you should do with 5 acres. So we split it into smaller bits and designed a lake, a woodland, a spinney, a formal garden, an orchard, a veg patch. We did it separately, then stuck it all on a big white sheet of paper and drew the pathways around so we could walk all the way around the whole thing. The house, we settled for a very traditional parochial style house with stone coins and a slate roof. So March 2003, when all the paperwork was sorted, we finally got into doing something with it. And we started right from the beginning. You can see on that picture that we had to take in heaps of stone even to get into the place in the first instant. And there was a very old hedge along the roadside that was full of honeysuckle, dog roses, holly, hawthorn, all sorts of things, very old, 100-year-old hedge. And the digger man said, I'll just pull all that out, put it in the heat and we'll burn it. But with conservation in mind, we said, no, don't do that. It's a lovely hedge. Dig a trench, scoop as much earth as you can out with it, roots and all. It's March, it should be dormant. Pat it down and we'll replace it, which we did. So I think we had in mind conservation right from the first off. Now, the advantage that we have this evening is that this is 20 years on, and we can now jump to show you that view 20 years on without seeing the work that went in between it. So 20 years on, it looks like that. That's exactly the same view. The trees have matured. You'll notice two dogs in there. Many of the pictures on this tonight will have dogs on. They're always around when we are taking pictures, but that's 20 years from that lane. The name of the house is the Fod, and that came from when the sons were phoning to ask Rosemary where I was. She said, oh, he's up at his field of dreams. And that became the name of the house and the name of the book. But interestingly, a few years afterwards, I was writing for a monthly column for a magazine published in Sligo. And the editor spoke fluent Irish, and he said, I love the name of your house. I said, do you? He said, yes. The Fod is Old Irish for turf or grassland. So it was lucky that we've got two meanings to the same name. Okay, just inside the gate, we tried to get a great Game of Thrones feeling to it. That's the entrance in the middle of winter. And of course, in summer, it's very green and like a green tunnel. Okay. And that's a bit further down the drive, and you can see just how rough it was and how poor the hedges were. Nothing whatever on that picture really to attract wildlife. And you can see on that when we started to cut into the land, the water was running down both sides. And I think that was another key message, to use local knowledge. You know, the digger man said straight away, you won't do anything with this until you put some drains in it. We'll drain some of the land down to where you're going to build the lakes. And that was really good information that I certainly wouldn't have thought of. And the other lucky thing of using local people, we went to the Moy, to a wholesale tree man there, the Donnelly, Andrew Donnelly, and he said some tips. He said, I'll design a wildlife hedge for you. I'll tell you what you need to plant. I'll tell you the species you need to plant for ordinary hedgerows. I'll draw out a little diagram on the distance you want. And he gave them all at cost price because he liked the idea of what we were trying to do. So he gave us honeysuckle, holly, all sorts of hedgerow plants. And that's the current one. So it goes from that to that, but it takes 20 years to do it. But you can see that his advice on what hedges to put in certainly worked. I've gone back to that picture because I've not seen that picture for a long time. And it's funny, when you look at a photograph, it really does remind you of something. That old dog there was a dog called Sal, very highly trained, but getting on in years. And it used to follow me everywhere. And one week, Rosemary's A-level geography teacher was sick and couldn't take the A-level group up to the Sperrins to do a river study. And I offered to do it for them, and I thought I'd take Sal with me. And she walked the heel when we got out of the bus, and I said to her, just sit still and watch what's going on. And in a river study, you drop a float into the river and measure the flow. Somebody drops it in at one end and somebody catches it at the other, and you can work out the volume and the current and that sort of thing. And everybody was busy writing notes except one lad who was just staring at me. And he wasn't working. And I was just going over to ask him what he was doing. And there was a cry from the river. Somebody had missed the float and it was heading out into the main river. So I said to the dog, go and fetch it, because we needed that for the lesson. And she went into the river, swam out to the main channel, caught the float in her mouth, walked back, put it into my hand. And this student who wasn't working walked over to me and he said, can I ask you something, sir? I said, yeah, of course. I was really excited that he'd finally got into work. And he said, how much would you take for that dog? Okay. So the Donnelly group, the tree merchant man, said another quick tip is to plant up the hedges around your formal garden even before you begin to build the house. So that's Rosemary and our middle son Eddie planting beech hedges. You can see it looks pretty barren ground there, but his advice was, even on the formal area of the garden, plant it up early. The sooner it grows, the sooner you might get some wildlife coming back. That's the same view now, 20 years on. 20 years on. It was the digging of the lakes that I think gave us most misgivings and really did make us wonder whether we're doing the right thing. Because once the heavy machinery got in there, it was astonishing just how much earth comes out of a hole. And if you do intend to dig some sort of lake or pond on your ground, make sure you've got somewhere to put the material that comes out. You can see that white line on the middle there. That's the depth of the water eventually, but we dug some deep holes to make sure there were areas that wouldn't freeze. But it's just the point about how much earth comes out of a hole that I wanted to make. Be careful of that. We needn't have worried because in a very short time, it looked like that. So nature applauds the optimist and it soon greened over. The little whips that we'd put in round the side thickened up really rapidly. Ireland grows great trees and it grows them very quickly. And that was the same lake earlier this summer. You know, it's matured, there's pondweed in it now, and it just doesn't look like a muddy hole. And that's a shot of it in winter. And I'll go quickly through these slides because you can just see the development of the formal garden from that. Okay, that's 5 years on. That's 10 years on. Again, about 11, 12 years on. And that's looking the other way, up towards the drive that we've just been looking at. You can see that middle hedge is thickening up. Thicken up the boundaries was another tip that he gave us, and the formal. And that was an old donkey shed, well, an old shed to put the mower in. And I said to the builder, build it as if it's 100 years old. I don't want a new shed. And he didn't like doing it because he's a precise builder. But when we'd finished it, I hope you think it looks like a shed that was 100, has been there 100 years. And he said to me, and I'll tell you this story because I can't resist. He said, all you need now is a donkey looking after that shed, and it'll be absolutely perfect. And we very nearly got one because there's a little newsagent in our village, and I go for the Sunday paper there. And you go in there, and it's all a bit gloomy, the news. You find out who's died and who's got a bad biopsy or whatever. And one day I went in there, and he said to me, "You'll never guess what's happened now, Bob." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Somebody's set fire to the donkey's backside." And I said, "Oh dear, was it killed?" He said, "No, not a real donkey, the plastic donkey in the village green that the council had put there." And it was a sort of big, hideous donkey with a donkey cart on it. It looked awful, really. And I was not going to be one that mourned its passing. But I said to him, "Where's the donkey gone then now?" And he said, "The council have taken it away." I said, "Where have they taken it to then? The Burns unit?" And he didn't laugh at all. But it was when I was driving back, I thought that donkey is exactly what I need for my shed. I can just have his head looking out of the shed, and it wouldn't worry me that it's not the donkey it once was. It's cheap to keep and need no mucking out. So I phoned the council on Monday morning and said to them, "I'm trying to locate a donkey with the burnt backside that your councilmen brought to the tip." And she said to me, "Sorry?" I said, "I'm trying to locate for my garden a plastic donkey with a burnt backside that the council brought to the tip." And she said, "Are you English?" I said, "Yes." And she put the phone down on me. End of story. I'm still looking for a donkey. Okay, so some new land came up for sale. You can see right down the middle there, that's the old map that we started with today. And then another 12 acres came up for sale, including a 3-acre old wood. And so the price kept dropping and dropping, and we finally bought it, but planted it up with 4,500 native Irish trees. But we had a system by that stage, so we knew how to dig lakes and did it very easily and quickly. We also had a system for planting whips around it because we knew they'd grow well. So we planted alders and willows and birch. But the lessons we've learned really is that you need a wide wildlife habitat, some lessons about design, and a few odds and ends. And if you were to take one message from all of this, it's the wetland habitat has been the magnet, the one thing that really has made a difference. If you've got any kind of water on your land or garden, a pond will make enormous difference to what it attracts. If you're digging a bigger lake, as we have, then you do need a feed of water coming into it. That channel runs off the peatland bogland. It never dries up. And in times of flood, it will flow very strongly and wash away all the mud and the leaves and so on. So it's important to remember that. It'll soon go stagnant if not. And the first year we put the lakes in, 4 frogs appeared, and I was really excited about that. But I hadn't realized that we were starting a wildlife chain that led to all sorts of things. The frogs were the number one start. The next year, there were a few more frogs, and they've continued to multiply ever since. But what I hadn't realized is that once the frogs were plentiful, then the buzzards came. and the buzzards often sit round the pond. I hadn't realized just how many frogs they take in the springtime. Sometimes we'll have 6 or 7 buzzards all sitting, watching, waiting for an unwary frog to just cross from one lake to the next. I can see why they call it a wake of buzzards, because they do sort of sit just with heads bowed until it's time for action. And the nice thing about it is that we've a lot of rabbits as well at the moment. So with the frogs and the rabbits, the buzzard numbers on our patch have increased massively. Every year in the old wood at the bottom, the buzzards breed successfully. Again this year, the last 10 years, they've bred successfully every single season from the same nest. And of course, once you've got rabbit carcasses around, then you've got the buzzards will just come and get that. I love buzzards. I think that I just like the sight and the sound of them. Okay, the newts appeared as well, part of the chain, and we feed up one end of the lake with barley and with some smaller seeds. And it's just been a wildlife treat to watch how the wild mallard and a truly wild duck, how they find it. Our record last year, we've not done quite as well this year so far, but our record in one evening sitting down there was 33 mallard and 10 teal. And that's in an area where a few years ago you wouldn't have seen a single duck. So it's sort of a spectacular thing to do, to sit in the evening and just watch them coming in. We built a little bird watching hut to do exactly that. So that's that. It just keeps the rain off and the wind off. When the first otters appeared, I was staggered by it. Nobody had told us there were any otters around. None of the people around us had seen an otter for years, and yet suddenly there they were. I had a lovely experience of sitting in the little hut, and an otter came to look at me, and we were looking at one another for about 10 minutes. He was just sniffing the air, and I was looking at him. But what a wildlife treat to have an otter sitting looking at you in your own garden where you didn't have a lake before. And I love that picture. I was looking at how the lake had frozen, and then an otter suddenly just walked across, which is interesting. And that's a bit out of focus because it was taken from one of the trail cameras, but I'll pop that on to say 2 things really. One, that the garden centres sell plastic herons in order to try and deter other herons from coming to the ponds. And what we've noticed is that when one heron arrives, another 5 follow it. So perhaps the plastic heron does the opposite of what the garden centres say. But I put that picture in because I was watching a heron, it was last year, and it caught an eel that was maybe a foot long, and it wrestled it, finally killed it, and then swallowed it. An eel from a lake that wasn't a lake until about 15 years ago. I was just staggered to see an eel in there. I know they can move over wet fields in the evening, but it's just an amazing thought that we've suddenly got eels in there. And even more astonishing to me, the dogs disturbed a heron in the reeds last year, and it dropped what it was carrying, and it was a river lamprey. Like an eel, but with no jaw, like a sideways thing. And again, I had to ask, where on earth does that come from? So woodland habitat, the woodland edge. How am I doing for time, by the way? Still?
Well, I was just about to say that, but it's 20 to 8, so if we round up in about 5 minutes, just give people
Okay.
15 minutes for questions, because there's quite a few
Okay.
questions here.
Yeah, I'll fly through. Okay. These are the list of the trees that the tree surgeon man gave me, and the brackets are the number of insects per tree. So if you've only got room for one tree, 284 insects on oak trees, that's the one to plant. But of course, rowans with 28 don't have so many insects, but they do have the berries on them that the birds love. In our woodland, the old wood, that we had a dilemma as well. The conservationists say leave the ivy on the trees. The foresters say take the ivy off the trees. So we've left some ivy on some trees and taken it off others. But we like woodland edge and a way to walk around it. The bamboo at the back is one of my serious mistakes. I wouldn't do that again. I chose the wrong sort of bamboo. It's the spreading sort. A lot of rabbits do live in it. They like it, but it should have been clump forming bamboo, really. We use seeds for the bluebells, so don't go necessarily to buy expensive bulbs. The seeds eventually come good. And in the new planting, we cut in rides like that. We planted them tightly together, knowing that we're going to take some of them out. And we put daffodils in, which I know a lot of purists don't like at all, but I think there's nicely a sign of spring there. And this is ash dieback. We lost nearly all the new ash trees. You can see that browny silver shape at the top. That's a sure sign that the tree's gone. And we actually have got some of the bigger ash trees that have succumbed as well. And the advice there is really, if it's clearly going to die, take it down as soon as you can before it gets rotten. In the new field, we've got smaller trees, a range of hazels and that sort of stuff. These have been in about 5 years now, I think. And of course, we got the first pine martins a couple of years ago, which is interesting to see. And the grassland, I'll go quickly through these. Once we'd got our ideas on what should be in an Irish meadow, we stopped messing about and just left it like that. And I think meadowsweet, knapweed, buttercups, that's what you need. And once the meadow was right, then the mice and the voles came back. Butterflies and honeybees on a Chinese plant, Buddleia, but they don't seem to matter. And once the voles and the mice came back, the barn owls came back. But we haven't seen one for 3 years, so I don't know whether they've moved off somewhere else. And the meadow has to be cut in the October. That's a standing stone that was buried in the ground. There's another 3 feet of it under the earth. We just stood it up. I think it's quite interesting. And then these trees were all in a skip in a garden centre. So I just put them in and they recovered. Okay, I'll go quickly on. First, hares appeared. We'd never seen those for a long time. Pheasants. There's a moorland at the side of us, a bogland, which I think should be preserved. It's got snipe and woodcock on it. I've got no joy with getting that preserved yet, but I still keep fingers crossed. And the formal part of the garden, as I said, has in front of the kitchen window a jumble of flowers, but it's great for butterflies and all sorts of other smaller wildlife. Yeah, I'll just rattle through these. We've got a feeder in front of the kitchen window. I put that picture in because we use Surfinia in there, which is no use for insects at all. No, don't do that, in other words. And the Cotoneaster there, that's a lovely bush. It's got plenty of berries on it. 2 weeks later, it had none. It's food for the missel thrushes, the fieldfares, the redwings, the thrushes, the blackbirds, and in 2 weeks it's gone. House martins under the eaves, collared doves, their population builds up and then it gets knocked down by the sparrowhawks. So it stays about the same. Oh, an odd pheasant came one day. I took a picture of it. A family of long-tailed tits on the outside the kitchen window, and 3 years ago the first woodpeckers arrived. Garden design. I won't say much about this, but we looked at Capability Brown, and he said it should look as if nature's put it there when you've finished. And this looks like it's a natural landscape, but it isn't. As that is, all that's manufactured, but we hope it looks like it is being put there by nature. Okay, I'm just going to rattle through some of these now. I think you'll get a feeling for it then. He also said if you can run the formal garden down into being less formal and into the countryside so you can't see where it ends. Okay, trees. And again, that's a copy of Monet's Bridge south of Paris. That's the thing in winter. Yeah, okay. Odds and ends, we've got a real increase in wood pigeons in our patch. I suspect it's because of the trees, and rabbits everywhere. And the nice thing about that is that the buzzards have come, but we're now continually seeing stoats. I mean, I saw the first one maybe 5 years ago, but they are now knocking around, and it's nice to see them. We've had to wire in all the veg patch, of course, so once the rabbits have increased. And yeah, okay. That's the new field lower thing. And I popped that one on because it's a spotted flycatcher. They've almost died out in England. It's been a disastrous decline, yet we've still got them coming here, which is lovely. So we're doing something right, I think. We've seen 66 species of birds and 14 mammals. I'm not counting those just flying over. These are residents. So the wildlife dream has worked. And a few years ago, we won the most sustainable environmental project for the whole of Ireland. And then a couple of years ago, the Gold Award in Houses of Parliament. And I mean, I just think if novices like us can make a change, then anybody can. I'm going to stop there because I've had to dash through a bit. I hope
Thank you so much, Bob. That was absolutely fantastic to see the transformation basically over the last 20 years. And I'm sure everyone will agree your pictures were actually amazing. Did you take those pictures, a lot of those wildlife pictures yourself? They're fantastic.
Oh yeah.
Really amazing. And I know a lot of our members have had the pleasure of actually visiting your garden over the last number of years, which is great. So, you know, thanks so much for letting people actually come and see your garden as well, because it looks fantastic.
I mean, it's much more pleasurable to show people around the garden and to chat face to face than over Zoom, I think, anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was going to say, I'm just going to run through. I know you've got a book as well, so if people wanted to find out more, didn't you you have written a book, haven't you, about your garden transformation as well? So
it was just somebody one day said, "Have you ever written the book on this? I'd buy it if you read it, if you wrote it." So Blackstaff Press published it.
fantastic.
It's doing all right.
I'm going to go quickly through the chat here. So there's some comments, observations. So I'm going to try and not read all those out, but go to the questions because I know we don't have an awful lot of time here. A lot of people talking just again, not seeing much kestrels and obviously mentioning the huge decline in insect life. Somebody beautiful pictures again. People love to see your pictures in your lake. It was beautiful, that winter picture with the otter on it. Other question here. How deep is your pond? Somebody wanted to know. That was Patrick Fitzsimons wanted to know how deep your pond was.
It's about 10 feet at its deepest, and then we shallowed it up to about 18 inches at the other end. So we didn't know whether how deep to do it, but we wanted some shallow margins for to be able to feed the mallard.
Perfect. Have you any advice on reed beds was another question that we were asked.
Well, we didn't put any aquatic plants around it at all. And what I think happened when we dug the lakes, the digger simply dug up what was there and redistributed them, and they grew. So we didn't put any of the bulrushes in or the reeds or anything. They just appeared from somewhere. Even the yellow irises came. There must have been an odd one in the meadow before we started.
The other question I have here, let's see. Yeah, great to see buzzards doing well, also your frogs. Let me see what else I can see. Is the grass around the heron grazed? Somebody wanted just to know. Is that area grazed around the pond, or?
No, we still cut the formal lawns, mainly because aesthetically I can't stand it looking out of the house and having it long grass. But more importantly, the shorter grass in front of the house is like a magnet for wildlife. Any morning there'll be hares on it, rabbits, pheasants, water hens, all sorts of wildlife seem to come out of the denser grasses and denser vegetation and sit on the cut grass. Now, I don't know whether that's because they can see the predators coming or whether they just want a drier patch. But you do need longer meadow grass, but we've got plenty of that as well. But it's astonished us just how many species come and sit on the ordinary lawns.
Like somebody wants to know what kind of mower you use. Very specific for mowing your meadow. Do you have a specific mower? Or do you use a multi?
Yeah,
it's
well, you've got me now. It's a big one and it's fast, so it's just the width of the I've just forgotten its name. It's I'll think of it while we chat.
Okay. The others just commenting about the importance of ivy as well, how it's important for nectar, etc. So ignore those foresters.
No, right.
Other people just saying you've been very busy, huge project and a lovely garden. Absolutely stunning. People feeling very inspired. How much maintenance does your garden need? Bob, that's a good question because I was asking you that earlier.
Yeah, the formal garden, the cutting of hedges, that's when I get some help in. But the mowing is surprisingly easy in that we only mow the width of one mow through on most of the pathways. You'll get times in the year when you do need maintenance. Like at the moment, we've had 3 trees down. They'll need cutting up sometime. And we don't shift the timber. We just 3 of them have come down over the pathway, so we'll just throw it to one side. It's good for wildlife to leave some logs around.
Yeah, absolutely. Any let me see, just fantastic. Thank you for sharing the project. Amazing work. What a dream. Great work, Bob. Just some of the comments, because I know it's very hard on Zoom to get that feedback from people. Lovely presentation. Thank you very much. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks for sharing all your photos. Very inspirational talk and beautiful pictures. It really is very special. Bob, Peter Archdale would like to know, do you have any plans for how you'll adapt the site as the maintenance becomes more difficult? I know he's saying he struggles with his plans for his own place over the next 10 years.
Well, I think it's it's a good question of what we do with it in the end. You
Yeah.
know, I've always had a dream that it would be turned over into almost a proper wildlife sanctuary, so that somebody would take it on, because it's got all the makings of it now and it's well established. And I'd hate it to be returned to ordinary farmland again and to go backwards, as it were.
I don't think that would ever happen. I think that would be a lovely place of yours for someone to take on for sure.
Mm.
Somebody else said that the pleasure of visiting your garden must have been maybe a member, Patricia Heron, a few years
Oh
ago.
yeah, I remember Patricia.
Yeah, so yeah, we'll hopefully try and do that maybe again, Bob, this year, this summer.
Yeah.
Although the summer wasn't quite great at times this year, but it would be nice to arrange another few visits for members. Which bird, Patricia would also like to know, which bird or animal excites you the most to see in your garden?
No, that's a good question. Um, the one that I don't think I'd ever seen before was a water rail, and I thought that was pretty exciting to see that. You know, I didn't know what it was for it's got like a strange scimitar-shaped beak, and they're very elusive birds. And seeing one of those was astonishing, especially since it had chicks with it as well. We were sitting in the hut one day and a water rail appeared, and it's a pretty rare event to see one out in the open. Um, but my favourite bird, the house martins take some beating, I think. I love to see them when they're. I've got so many that I like watching at different times of the year. But house martins, once the young start to fly, and as I say, that nests we had this year, it was spectacular when they came out.
Fantastic. So nice to see a water rail, Bob, as well. That's a interesting one to see. I'm going to see if
And of
anybody else.
course,
Oh, sorry.
the first barn owl we saw was exciting, but that I think they're still in the area, an odd one, but it's not. We've not seen them on our patch for a while.
Just going to see if anybody else has any other questions. If you maybe does any other questions for Bob? If they'd like to maybe unmute and ask, or just maybe raise your hand in the reactions there, so I can see. You can just press or put your hand up in the reactions if you want to ask Bob a question.
I mean, the nice thing would be to
Rita?
have a longer face-to-face, a proper meeting somewhere, because
Yes, that would be lovely,
have
wouldn't
to.
it? I think in the winter it's always hard for people, especially with those storms lately. I'm sure a lot of people
Yeah,
don't want to leave their house at this time of year.
yeah,
I have
exactly.
Brita Finn, sorry, has a question. Brita, would you like to unmute and you can ask Bob a
Yeah.
question?
Hi, Bob. I'm well impressed with your garden. It's fabulous. I just wondered, when you started off, the ground was really wet. It seems to
Yep.
have dried out really well now. Is that because of the trees, or how did you manage that? Because I've got a piece of ground and it's very wet. So I'm hoping with the addition of the trees that it might dry it out a little bit. Does it work like that?
Well, it has until this last 2 years when we've had extreme rainfall at times, and a lot of the bits that have been very dry have still not dried out completely, I think. The drainage did work, but um, the last 2 winters and last summer, there's a lot of very heavy rain, and the trees do take up some of the moisture, but I think there's a point at which they can't cope with it all.
Okay.
It 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 has definitely overall dried the plot up, but it's just these freak seasons seem to have made it very, very wet.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, I know we're running out of time, but the thing that keeps me going with this sort of project is that, and I often quote, the passenger pigeons in America in the 1850s. There were millions of them, perhaps even billions, too many to count. And it was said that when they were migrating south, the sky was black with them for days on end. and the Americans started to put them into cans and to shoot them, sell their meat, and cut their habitat down. And the last one died in Cincinnati Zoo in Cincinnati Zoo in 1914. So in about 50 odd years, they'd wiped out millions of passenger pigeons and made them extinct. And modern day Americans often say, you know, how did they let that happen? Couldn't they see what was happening to the bird? And why didn't they stop it? And when you look at what's happening to our farmland birds, it's not quite as drastic as the passenger pigeon, but it's getting there. And Rosemary and I would hate it if in you know, a few years' time, our grandchildren are asking the question, did they not see it coming? Did they not see it happen? Could they not stop it? And I think that's the driving force for us. And I'm sure for many of the folks listening to this evening.
Thanks, Bob. I've got another question here before we just kind of try and wrap up. Peter Archdale has a question for you.
Good
Peter?
evening. Hi, good evening. Many thanks for that. Just a question. There was a bit of toing and froing at the beginning about influences on the land. And my personal observation here is that the number of earthworms has crashed. Well, I would say it's crashed. It's certainly, they're very scarce, and that has huge knock-on effects. And might be because of the New Zealand flatworm, it might be because of agriculture, it might be climate change, it doesn't really matter. But just as to turn that into a question, what are your earthworm numbers like?
They're good in the vegetable patch because we put in loads of compost, but outside, I agree with you that the numbers have disappeared almost. It's certainly they're very good on the bit that we put the compost on. I don't know about the land outside, which is farmland, you know.
I'm sort of linking that to the previous question about drainage, and I think also, you know, that's a big factor as well. Sorry, the absence of worms means the drainage isn't nearly as good as it should be. And maybe Ulster Wildlife could try and fund some sort of survey, citizen science survey of this.
Mm. Well, two members, I mean, on a different subject, two members did come over and do a survey of the bogland that I'm trying to get preserved, and they found some very interesting plants on that. It's surprisingly difficult to get anybody interested, though. And yet boglands are really a pretty unique habitat, well worth preserving, but it's hard to get the people who could make it happen interested.
Bob, someone has just asked about the sketches, you know, your sketches of your land, and are those in your book at all? Those, like, did you put any of just like your plan?
Question. I don't think I did.
No.
No, because I think I drew those up quickly just from the point of view when you go to talk to a group somewhere to try and give them an idea of what the land looked like.
They'll all be available. Just to let the person that asked that question, just to let you know that all this talk is recorded and will be available. We'll be sharing the recording with you in a few days, so you will have access. They will have access to everything that's on the talk, including those sketches if they wanted to look at it again.
Oh, okay.
So you can go over any of this again in your own time. So Bobby, I just think we're just going to finish up. I know there's other things coming through here too. Just, you know, again, thank you so much for that. It was really fascinating, and I hope we get, as I said, you know, hopefully we'll keep an eye out for. I organise most of the events at Ulster Wildlife, so I'll make sure. Obviously, there's a lot of interest still in your garden. I think we might have some more interest now in your garden from anyone who would like to visit Sir Bob's garden, put your hands up till we see how many might be interested. we could potentially run another event this year, so that would be great. So yeah, thanks very much, everyone. I'm going to just, we do have more talks now planned. So Bob, I'm going to just share my screen and put on just to show people what's coming up really.
Okay.
So we have, so I'm just going to go through this, more talks planned over the next few weeks, really up until the middle of March. So this isn't the end of it. We have next week, we've got the brilliant bugs of our bogs. So if you're into bogs, which we very much are, you can join Simon next Wednesday. Simon's a fantastic speaker, so highly recommend that. We've also got Dave Wall from the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group after that. So again, Dave will be talking about all of the ocean giants that you'll find and that visit Northern Ireland waters. Butterflies for Valentine's Day with Rosemary, our head of nature recovery. Bees with Katie, our senior conservation officer, how to get your garden buzzing for bees. Then we'll have Rachel, our marine conservation manager, looking at our native oyster restoration work and all of the fascinating species that have benefited from that, not just oysters, but lots of really interesting things from eels to nudibranchs to fish species that are benefiting from that. Then we'll have Dr. Emma Rooney looking at raptors in Northern Ireland and how we can help safeguard our raptors. And Damien McFerrin from Cedar finally looking at dragons and damselflies in Northern Ireland and the big Irish survey that's taking place and how people can get involved in that. So we've quite a few people raised their hands, or 5 people would be interested. I'm sure there'd be more maybe that would be interested in coming along to your talk, Bob. But I just want to say thanks to everybody for coming. These talks are free for Ulster Wildlife members and £3 for non-members. If you're not a member of Ulster Wildlife, we do have a fantastic offer on for the whole month of January, where you can join us at especially reduced rate. So please visit our website and join us and help bring nature back. So thank you very much, everybody. That's it from us, and we'll see you all again soon.